Good morning, welcome back to the channel. Happy Three Kings Day to everyone out there. And there's lots of Celtic news to get around this morning. There's speculation about one Celtic transfer that's been put to bed by Brendan Rodgers. Thankfully, a lot of people will be saying, because it wasn't a player that a lot of Celtic fans didn't really want. And let's face it, nobody said that we were looking for a defender. Anyway, let's move on from that. Stephen Welsh, we'll get to him first of all. Stephen Welsh, his injury isn't as bad as it was first feared. This is positive as far as Celtic is concerned. There's no shortage of options in defence, as we know. But when it comes to it, the time that we come back to playing our game against Bucky Thistle, and that'll be one Bucky bus and a half. Cameron Carter-Vickers, Liam Scales, Rocky will all be added into the mix, and Stephen Welsh. That'll be your four players vying for two positions come the end of this transfer window. Although Brendan Rodgers will look to bring some depth into the squad, defence is not an area we're looking at, so stick around to the end of the video till we talk about that. In other Celtic transfer news this morning, big one coming out of Ireland is the Shamrock Rovers are close to a new loan deal with Celtic striker Johnny Kenny. You remember him, he was brought in by Ange Postecoglou at the time. The under 21-year-old Ireland striker Johnny Kenny will be staying in Ireland. It looks like his loan deal was up just at the end of the year there, and it looks like Celtic are going to put him out on loan again. A number of clubs across the UK expressed an interest in a loan deal for Kenny, but Celtic are happy to put a second loan deal with Rovers, at least until the summer, possibly for the entirety of 2024. He is on a long-term contract with Celtic. He is on a 5-year contract. He is only 2 years into that contract. Will he get his time at Celtic? Will he prove himself as a player that Brendan Rodgers will bring back to Celtic and get a stake for that first team place? It'll be an interesting watch. One player that Celtic let go at the end of his loan deal, who slid out the door, back down to Liverpool, and Celtic never even mentioned it, which is, it's a bit unusual for Celtic. They never thanked him for his effort, even though he was at fault for 2 goals. Just don't talk about it. Anyway, on Friday evening, Nat Phillips took to Instagram to extend his heartfelt, he said his goodbye message on Instagram, basically, and if I go on Instagram, we'll see it here. Nathan Phillips said, it was a pleasure and a privilege to represent Celtic FC and their supporters. I wish everyone at the football club all the best for the rest of the season and the future. And the first one to put a comment in was Mikey Johnson. All the best, big man. Mikey Johnson, who seems to outlast many players at Celtic, surprisingly. Anyway, let's move on to bigger and better news. Brendan Rodgers he's paid big money. He's paid big money to come back to Celtic. He's paid big money, as anybody in management will know, that the letting go of staff is one of the hardest things that you can do. Brendan Rodgers has been talking about it, and it's a difficult part of any manager's job, not just a football player's job, because you've got to remember, football players, they do have a limited lifespan as a career into their early 30s, so it is quite a short career. So telling a player that devastating news that they're no longer going to be able to play for Celtic is something Brendan Rodgers is talking about. He says it's not all roses in the garden, says Brendan. He says behind the scenes, you've got to have tough decisions to make. You've got to have tough conversations to have. I spoke about this after the 3-0 victory over St Mirren on Tuesday, admitting that conversations with players and the lack of a future at the club can be a hard one to take. He says this comes at the opening of the January transfer window, and it says obviously there are a few faces that will be departing the club. He said it's the hardship of the job. He said it's one of the toughest moments that you have to do in football, but not just in football, in any management style, in any management position in life. He says it's one of the tough moments. You always think that you're better being clear with the player and where that player then stands when it comes to the football club. It's a challenge because you know that sometimes they will leave here, they will leave Celtic, and they won't have the similar conditions that they'll at their next club. They won't be fighting for trophies. They won't be fighting for winning every game. They won't be fighting to win medals and things. He says it's a difficult decision, but you have to think of the better and betterment of the club. He says, and that's what it all comes down to. Sometimes it's better for the club and the player himself if he moves on. It's sometimes better for the player's career if he moves on and he gets playing regular football, and then he can go on to have a fantastic football career. There's nothing worse than sitting on the bench and not getting any game time at all. Scott Bain. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. It's a side of the job, Brendan Rodgers says, especially when players are so honest and that they're on their way up. Players come in and they say that they know that they're young and they know they're progressing as players, but there has to be a time where it's like you're just not going to be good enough for Celtic, says the manager. He says it's the reality. The reality is, as a manager, it's what you get paid to do. At times, it's hard to remember that those working within the football industry and, they are human. Players are human. We give players a lot of stick, and they are just human beings. They have families. They have aspirations, career aspirations, just like you might have. But then again, there's a lot of people called Rangers fans that don't have any aspirations at all. So we move on for that. Anyway, there's no things different with Brendan Rodgers. He has had to make those decisions. He's made them. He's talked to the players, and it's going to be an interesting window just to see who leaves Parkhead in January. One player that is not coming to Celtic, thankfully. I did say this was an interesting one because at no point over the past, and I've mentioned, to go back to the videos, I've mentioned this a couple of times, at no point has anyone at Celtic or anyone connected to Celtic or any fans been talking about the fact that we've been looking at a defender. Our talks and everything's been talking about getting rid of defenders because currently we've got too many. Nat Phillips has just left the club. And when everyone is back and fit, we will have Rocky, we'll have Gustav Lager-Belke, we'll have Cameron Carter-Vickers, we'll have Liam Scales, we'll have Welsh, and we'll have Kobayashi. Now, two of those players are going to go. And Nate Phillips has already left. Kobayashi is on his way out the door. So Gustav Lager-Belke, what will happen to Gustav? Will he be put out on loan, or was he one of the players that's going to be told that, I don't think they're going to be good enough and physically strong enough for the defence that we need at Celtic, unfortunately. So he'll be let go. Despite this, Celtic have been linked with Nottingham Forest centre-back Scott McKenna, and I was worried that we were going to end up at the end of this transfer window with Scott McKenna. And I did say, look, the only reason I could think that Celtic might be going for him is for that Scottish contingent for Europe. But when it comes to it, Brendan Rodgers has come out and said, look, not for me. He's not on the list. He is not on the list. I'm well aware of the player, but he's not on the list. He's basically said no. So let's put it to bed. Let's end that conversation right there. Which, tell me what you think about that in the comments. For me, I'm kind of glad because if he's never managed to do it after leaving Aberdeen, what's to say that he's going to come here and do it in Celtic? It's about and Nat Phillips type signing, Anyway, we move on from that. He's done. It's dusted. It's over. The Sevco can have him, the papers are saying. The Sevco have a free reign to go and buy him on the cheap, on a loan deal. Who's going to loan a player out to the end of this? I just don't buy this at all. I don't buy this nonsense that they're going to loan a player out that's only got a contract to the end of the season. You would sell him for a nominal fee to get some money back in for him. Anyway, that's the Scottish media for you. They make you laugh. One player that's made the media yesterday talking about his time at Celtic, and there's been a clamber over the last couple of transfer windows to bring home Kieran Tierney, but he has spoken, and I did warn a lot of Celtic fans when he made the move to Spain, it's going to be hard for him to want to go back to England and especially come back to Scotland. See what you think about a player being a Celtic fan, but once you do make the move to a country like Spain to play your football and live that lifestyle that they live over here, it is a bit colder at the top of Spain. It's a bit more like Scotland at this time. Well, a wet Scotland at this time of year. It is a little bit warmer than Scotland, but it's still really cold and wet and damp and miserable. Anyway, I think he picked the wrong back to Spain, but he does love playing football in Spain, and let's face it, who wouldn't? Kieran Tierney has admitted that his Celtic transfer to Arsenal was for the best. He will always be a Celtic fan. He's obviously been speaking to the media in Spain after coming back from his injury. He says, look, I dreamed of playing for Celtic since I was a boy. He signed when he was just 7-year-old. It filled my heart with joy, said Kieran Tierney. He says, once those lyrics are run around Celtic Park during his time at Celtic, he says, for me, 4 titles, 3 trebles, iconic derby moments, Champions League nights. Kieran Tierney, he says, look, I achieved all that I needed to at Celtic. He said, there's not much more that I could achieve. Even if I was to go back to Celtic, how could I better that? He says, before completing a record-breaking 25 million move to Arsenal in 2019, he says, I had to think about it, and it hurt at the time. The departure and leaving Celtic gave me a lot of time to think, and time's been a healer. He says, wouldn't be surprised if I did end up back at Celtic at one point. He says, but that day, if it ever comes, is no doubt is a long way off from now. Kieran Tierney is loving life in Spain with Real Sociedad, and he's spending, this year on loan. He's in no rush, he said, to go back to England, even though Arsenal are in a bit of a crisis in that position. They're currently sixth in La Liga, and in the last 16 in the Champions League, there's no way that he is going back to England. The Spanish team want him full time. It'll all depend on what it's going to cost him this summer. So I did warn you at the start of the season when everybody knew that Kieran Tierney could go out on loan. I said if he gets the chance to go to Spain, he will take it. He has no regrets about his time at Arsenal, does Kieran Tierney. But this the decision, he said, to depart Celtic when the club were going for an iconic 10 in a row was an emotional one. He wanted to win the 9 in a row with Celtic. It was far from straightforward. There's other players that have came to Celtic and have no attachment to the club. But this was my club. I was fortunate to be an academy player. I was fortunate to be one of these young guys that come through the system at Celtic. One of the exact same type of players that Celtic fans love to give a hard time to. We need to nurture our youth system. We need to nurture the players that come through, and we need to boost them on, and make them the next Kieran Tierney. But we always seem to give our young boys that come through the system a bit of stick, and we seem to then put them out on loan. Anyway, he said, when I first signed for Celtic when I was 7, I always think then, he says, when I joined the first team for the academy, I see players now doing that at Real Madrid, at Real Sociedad. And when you look at it, this is their club. They come through the system. I know how they feel about the club. I'll never feel the same about the club for them, but this is their club. And I had the exact same thing with Celtic. When you have 15 players like that, it's tremendous. I was happy at Celtic. I was happy to get the offer from Arsenal, but I didn't want to leave Celtic. Where they'd made a couple of offers for Kieran Tierney to go to Arsenal. And he said, the time that they came in with the big money, he said, look, it was a win-win for everyone. I was happy at Celtic. Not that I wanted to leave, but it was for the best, said Kieran Tierney. He says, I've been very happy here at Real. He says, even with injury, he says, I played 11 or 12 games so far, and even in the Champions League. I've played against Real Madrid. I've played against Valencia. He's not going home, boys. Sorry to put that down on you. Anyway, that's it for this morning's Celtic news. The big news, obviously, today is the fact that Celtic are no longer, Celtic have never been interested in Scott McKenna. Thank goodness, a lot of people will be saying, because, let's face it, I did say I couldn't understand where this one was coming from. I couldn't understand why there was this sudden need for us to go out and buy a defender when we're trying to offload players. The boss has been talking about the fact that we need to trim the squad. This is going to end up in a rant, this one. This is the same backroom staff, right, and the same management at Celtic, Lawwell and co, that brought all these players in at the summer. Maybe they were expecting an exodus of players in the summer, and it never happened due to Brendan Rodgers coming back. Maybe that's the whole reason that we bought so many players in the summer. Could you imagine if we'd just been left with the players that have came in the summer? Would we be top of the league looking down on the Rangers as we go back into the season ahead? Tell me that one in the comments. And on that note, have a fantastic Three Kings Day. Every Celtic fan all around the world.